He watched the sky turn black again. A German fighter pilot, low on fuel and completely out of ammunition, had just watched his third B-17 Flying Fortress break apart and tumble toward the fields below. The guns on his Messerschmitt were silent now, but what terrified him wasn't the empty belts. It was the realization that tomorrow there would be even more bombers than today. In that moment, he understood what so many Luftwaffe aces would come to feel in their bones. They weren't fighting an air force anymore. They were fighting a factory. Before we dive in, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what part of World War II aviation fascinates you most. If this kind of deep human look at the air war over Europe is your thing, hit subscribe, tap the bell, and share this video with a friend who loves history. Now, let's step into the cockpit and the control rooms where a war of skill collided with a war of production, and why German pilots realized the math was against them long before the final bullet was fired. To understand how devastating that realization was, you have to go back to 1943. The strategic bombing campaign against Germany was intensifying. Every day, long lines of American bombers from the USAAF 8th Air Force crossed the English Channel, heading for the Ruhr, Berlin, Regensburg, and Schweinfurt. The B-17 Flying Fortress, bristling with .50 caliber machine guns and carrying a crew of 10, became the symbol of the daylight assault. The Germans called it the Flying Fortress for a reason. It was tough, and in tight formation it was deadly to attack. But the Luftwaffe wasn't impotent, far from it. In 1943, German fighter pilots were among the most seasoned in the world. Many had been flying since 1939. They knew their Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s like extensions of their own hands. They had developed tactics through years of hard fighting, head-on attacks to rake the cockpit, climbing slashing passes from the beam, and diving through the formation to break it apart. They were good, very good. Aces like Adolf Gallen, Heinz Baer, and Günther Rall personified that edge. When they launched, they expected to shoot bombers down. Often they did, and this made what came next even more brutal. In late 1943, Luftwaffe intelligence officers, poring over claims, celebrated. On some raids, German reports suggested that 30 or even 40% of the attacking bombers were destroyed. Pilots came back with gun barrels still warm, telling stories of B-17s breaking in two or limping away trailing smoke. The diary of one frontline pilot captured the mood after a big raid. "We shot down 60 today. They cannot possibly sustain losses like this." In Berlin, newspapers trumpeted victory. In the mess halls, relief and pride mixed with exhaustion. Then came Black Thursday, October 14th, 1943. The target, the ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt, vital to German war, production. The 8th Air Force sent waves of B-17s without full long-range escort. The Luftwaffe threw everything it had at them: Bf-109s, FW-190s, twin-engine Zerstörer armed with heavy cannons, and the new Werfer Granit 21 air-to-air rockets designed to break up tight formations. In a sky filled with contrails and tracer, German fighters ripped into the box formations. Parachutes bloomed against the gray. By day's end, the Americans had lost 60 B-17s, more than on any other single mission of the war. The German airfields were alive with the hum of returning fighters and the nervous energy of victory. Major Heinz Baer, an ace with more than 200 victories, landed, reported to intelligence, and gave voice to what everyone felt. "They cannot replace such losses. We've broken their offensive." He slept that night with the kind of tired satisfaction only a pilot soaked in adrenaline can know. 3 days later, reality hit like flak. On October 17th, radar stations in Western Germany picked up another massive American formation. The number of contacts looked eerily similar to the Schweinfurt raid. Controllers pushed squadrons to scramble. Baer, confused, turned to his commander. "We destroyed 60 of their bombers 3 days ago. Where are they getting replacements?" The answer didn't come from a cockpit. It came from a desk. That week, Luftwaffe intelligence officers sat down with numbers that stripped away the comfort of the Schweinfurt kill tally. They presented their findings to General Adolf Gallen, head of the fighter arm. The briefing was simple and devastating. American industry was producing B-17s at a rate of roughly 16 per day across the Boeing, Douglas, and Vega lines. 16 a day. That's 112 a week, nearly 500 a month. The 60 flying fortresses destroyed over Schweinfurt, replaced in less than 4 days. A stunned silence followed. Impossible, someone said. But it wasn't impossible. It was the new reality. The math exposed something profound about why Germany was losing the skies. Each B-17 that went down, it took 10 airmen with it. A terrible price. But the United States, with a population of 135 million, could feed a massive training pipeline. Thousands of new aircrew were graduating every month from bases in Texas, Arizona, and across the American South. Germany, with about 70 million people, was fighting a multi-front war. The Eastern Front alone consumed hundreds of thousands of men. Every Luftwaffe pilot lost over Germany was a pilot who couldn't be replaced quickly. Every destroyed fighter was one less aircraft to defend the Reich. Inside Luftwaffe files from late 1943, a memo put the truth in clear, bureaucratic prose. The enemy replaces his losses within days. We measure replacements in months. This is not sustainable. And the numbers told only part of the story. The pilot pipeline was breaking. Early in the war, German training was excellent. By 1943 to 44, the program was rushed. Fuel shortages meant fewer flying hours. New pilots reached frontline units with barely 100 hours total time, some with far less in the actual fighter they were supposed to fly into combat. Their opponents from the 8th Air Force often arrived with 300 to 400 hours, well-drilled in formation flying, gunnery, and instrument work. As one ace later admitted, the Americans could afford to lose aircraft. We could not afford to lose pilots. Hardware evolved too, and not in Germany's favor. Early B-17s were vulnerable to head-on attacks. Crews dreaded the frontal passes that hurled tracers directly into the cockpit. By late 1943, the B-17G added a chin turret, making those head-on attacks costly and often suicidal. Tactics improved, formation discipline tightened, and then came the escort fighters that changed everything. The P-51 Mustang with drop tanks. Now the bombers weren't just punching in and hoping to make it home alone. Mustang squadrons could stay with them to the target and back, all the way to Berlin. German pilots felt that shift viscerally. In early 1944, one diary entry captured it in a single line. We used to hunt bombers. Now we are the hunted. Fighters that once slashed through formations unopposed had to battle past aggressive escorts just to take a shot at a fortress. The Americans who survived their early missions became hard, experienced adversaries. They learned quickly. They flew in disciplined teams. And they were looking for victories. There's a haunting strand of testimony that speaks to the psychological war as much as the literal one. Post-war accounts describe captured German officers being shown American production numbers, sometimes even glimpses of assembly lines. Whether they were actual tours or carefully curated demonstrations, the message was unmistakable. At peak output, the combined plants could finish a B-17 at a rate that, averaged across lines, worked out to roughly one every 90 minutes. Not per day, every 90 minutes. One German pilot remembered standing for 4 hours, watching one complete flying fortress after another roll toward the flight line. I had spent 4 months in combat and shot down 3 B-17s, he later wrote. In the time I stood there, they built more than that. I was considered a skilled pilot. The contrast went beyond output. American workers ate lunch in clean cafeterias, coffee and sandwiches in hand. They joked, they looked healthy, well-fed. The factories were safe from air raids in a way no German factory could ever be. Meanwhile, German plants relied increasingly on forced labor, malnourished and exhausted, under the constant threat of air attack. Logistics in the United States were orderly and dependable. In Germany, they frayed under bombing and bureaucratic infighting. Systems matter, and here the systems were miles apart. If you strip the air war down to production and process, the picture is stark. Total B-17 production from 1936 to 1945 reached 12,731 aircraft. Add the B-24 Liberator, cranked out at even higher rates, especially at the famous Willow Run plant, and the Allied bomber fleet becomes a mountain. The P-51 Mustang, hundreds produced each month once the line hit its stride. Germany's total fighter output from 1939 to 1945 was around 90,000 aircraft, a big number. But Germany had to cover 4 fronts: the Western Front, the Eastern Front, the Mediterranean, and the defense of the homeland. And Allied plants were building specific types faster than Germany could build all types combined. Here's a statistic that historians love because it cuts through rhetoric. By 1944, it took Boeing roughly 13,000 man-hours to build one B-17. In the same period, German factories averaged on the order of 15,000 man-hours to build a single Bf-109, an aircraft far smaller and simpler. The Germans weren't just being outproduced, they were being out-engineered at the production level. Process, tooling, quality control, supply chains. These are boring words until your cities are on fire and you need fighters now. Add in geography, and the mismatch becomes cruel. American factories in Seattle, Long Beach, and Burbank were untouchable. Workers showed up on time. Trains pulled in with materials. The assembly lines didn't stop for sirens. In Germany, the very bombers the Luftwaffe struggled to stop were destroying the factories needed to build more fighters. It was a brutal loop. Not enough fighters to stop the bombers. Not enough factories to build more fighters. And every month, fewer resources to change the story. Albert Speer, Germany's Minister of Armaments, admitted later, by mid-1944, we were losing the production war faster than we were losing the shooting war. American industry was strangling us. Inside fighter briefings, that strangulation translated to a number on a chalkboard: 1,200 bombers today, 800 escorts. Veteran pilot Johannes Steinhoff recalled how despair crept in as the briefings grew. Every morning we heard the numbers. Every day, more aircraft than the entire Luftwaffe had operational in the West. We knew we would lose pilots. We flew anyway. Gallen later estimated that the life expectancy of a German fighter pilot engaging the American bomber streams in 1944 was measured in months. 3 for most, perhaps 6 for the best. After that, as he put it, mathematics took over. And yet, they kept flying. That's the part that stops you. Why walk back to the flight line when yesterday's mission felt like suicide? The answers were simple and human. Families lived in the cities underneath those bomber streams. Comrades expected you in the formation. Flying was the one thing these men knew, a skill honed since youth. They didn't take off because they believed in victory in 1945. They took off because not flying felt like abandoning everything and everyone they had. Left. After the war, former enemies met. Respect grew quickly. American aces who flew P-51 Mustangs, names like Chuck Yeager, spoke of German pilots as the best they ever faced, superbly trained, tactically sharp, courageous. German veterans said much the same about their opponents and added a hard truth. Adolf Gallen put it in one line that could serve as the epitaph of the air war. We were craftsmen fighting a factory. Craftsmen can win individual battles. They cannot win industrial wars. In a war of attrition, resources kill skill. Could Germany have won the air war if it had made different decisions? If the Me-262 jet had been built and deployed in greater numbers earlier? If leadership had listened to intelligence in 1941 that warned of America's massive industrial plans? These are the what-ifs that make World War II debate addictive. The deeper answers less romantic. Germany misjudged the kind of fight it was in. Its planning assumed a war of tactical superiority, better pilots, better tactics, ingenious technology. It got a war of systems, industrial capacity, logistics, resource management, and relentless mass production. By the time Luftwaffe leadership accepted that reality, it was too late to change the outcome. There's an irony here that's hard to miss. Many Luftwaffe veterans went on to work in aviation after the war, some even for American companies that had outbuilt them. The famous story of Franz Stiegler escorting a crippled B-17 to safety, and his later life in North America, symbolizes that strange, human turn history can take. In the 1990s, reflecting on the war, veterans often expressed relief that the enormous production capacity they had fought against had been used for defense rather than conquest. That too is part of the story. The production story of the B-17 is now taught in business schools as a case study in efficient mass production, and in staff colleges as a case study in how industrial capacity wins wars. Assembly line design borrowed from Detroit, disciplined logistics, quality control that caught defects before they flew. None of it is glamorous. All of it wins wars. And it offers a lesson that reaches far beyond 1945. If you show up to a systems fight with a craftsman's plan, you will lose, no matter how brave or brilliant your individual warriors are. Back in that October of 1943, a German pilot landed, cheeks raw from the cold, eyes red from hours in the mask. He had watched the sky eat bombers. For a fleeting moment, he believed he had seen the turning of the tide. 3 days later, the radar screens and the contrails said otherwise. He was not fighting a finite force. He was fighting a production line. When he strapped in after that, he carried more than ammunition. He carried a number in his head he could not shoot down. I want to hear what you think. The Luftwaffe had extraordinary pilots and often excellent technology, but they lost to a superior system and overwhelming industrial capacity. Where do you see this dynamic playing out today, whether in military conflicts, technology races, or business competition, where one side is still fighting the wrong kind of fight? Drop your thoughts below. I read every comment, and the most thoughtful often become future video topics. If this story pulled you in, subscribe and turn on notifications. Next week, we're looking at the Messerschmitt Me 262, the jet that might have changed everything if Germany had the production capacity and the leadership discipline to build and deploy it in time. Until then, remember the hard lesson the Luftwaffe learned, one B-17 at a time. In modern conflict, systems beat skill, logistics beat tactics, and production beats innovation when innovation can't scale.